Okay. There we go. Okay, so good afternoon. We're here today. We're talking to several of the resources we've actually spoken to before a few months ago about different climate, culture, and hybrid learning. And now that we're back in school itself, we just kind of wanted to touch base again and see the impacts of that. So who we have on the call today is, sorry, let me go through my panels here. Michael Bolling, who is the Assistant Superintendent for Learning and Innovation at the DOE for Virginia. We also have Brian Mott, who's the Executive Director for Virtual Virginia. And we have Karen Woodford, who is the Chief Learning Officer at Bedford County Schools. And we have Nikki Wilcox, who's School Safety Audit and Climate Survey Coordinator. So thank you guys again for joining us and having this conversation again. So I think we're going to start with Michael and have you kind of give us a big picture of what you're seeing out there as school has returned and sort of give some feedback on some unique challenges you guys have had to face and it's positives and negatives, I guess, are out there, I'm sure.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me, and really glad to be a part of this. And I think that first and foremost, I think it's important to really recognize the incredible work that school divisions have done to pivot and shift. We've been trying to, improve virtual learning in the United States for years, and it's been a pretty slow process because of demand, a low demand. All of a sudden, in the last 6 months, we've accelerated faster than anybody would ever imagine. And now we have teachers across the Commonwealth that are providing virtual instruction and hybrid instruction in many different ways. I actually think it might be interesting, and I'm going to share my screen just real quick to share with you how the breakup of how we're providing education instructional modalities in Virginia public schools right now. This table down here shows where we were at the beginning of the fall. So we had 80% of our students that were fully remote. That's 80% of the students. That's 50% of the school divisions. So 50% of the school divisions have 80% of the population. And then you notice that there's been a big shift just recently. And if you look up here in line 4, the yellow is showing the delta change between the fall and now. And so we've seen a 20% drop in the number of fully remote divisions and a move to partially hybrid. A lot of those have shifted where they're bringing in K1 and 2, pre-K 1 and 2, 3 students, the younger learners in person. And so we've seen some big shifts statewide. But so it provides some unique challenges, and a lot of those challenges are associated with the buildings, of course, that we're going to talk about today, and with IT challenges and all kinds of shifts. And so I will say that one thing that I think that Karen will probably talk about, and maybe Corey and others, is the necessity of flexibility when it comes to workspace and learning space. In my previous job, I opened up a new high school, a regional high school, and it was called Code RVA Regional High School. And it was focused on blended learning. So when you walked into that space, it was open space, more like a college library. And then students were called into classes by their teacher and scheduled through, for instance, a calendar. So an electronic calendar. So I think what's important there is kids were doing work while they had access to classrooms, but they were working in a big open space, which gave the flexibility. And quite honestly, that's the only high school in the state of Virginia that did not fully close at the beginning of the pandemic. It's because they were already ready for blended learning and for fully online learning. There may have been one governor school out in the Southwest that also continued education and a lot of the dual enrollment programs. And I'm sorry to go long-winded, but I think it's important to talk about the big picture of Virginia. When we get into the weeds of IT issues, I would say that everyone in the state has faced some sort of challenge. And it's about the expertise of teachers with virtual learning. It could be about bandwidth. It could be about access, internet access. It could have been a number of challenges, and a number of those had to do with space and physical space, and about the ability to bring kids back in and physically distance and keep them safe. So with that, I'll turn it over to the rest of the panel, and thank you for letting me give kind of the big picture overview umbrella.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, we're having a little technical difficulties ourselves. We were just talking about that a little bit ago. So thanks, Michael, for that bigger picture view. That's great. And I'll let Brian kind of speak to some of the IT pieces and the challenges you've faced and some of the resources that you've been asked to support and help, much like your nice light that you just showed us.
Production value.
Right? Production value.
No, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me today. You know, Virtual Virginia, we are the partner of public schools, and we support public school divisions as they implement, as Michael noted, either fully online or hybrid learning. We're there to support schools with the content, with resources, with a platform, sometimes just a phone call, you know, about how we do things, because Virtual Virginia has been doing this for over 30 years. For a lot of public school divisions, it's either very new or relatively new, this type of learning and implementing this type of learning. And so I think when we step back and look at it from 30,000 feet, it's all about the vision. What is the vision of the division, right? And how are they planning and executing that vision? And now, I mean, if you think about that process, we're just in the end of October. For a lot of divisions, this is month 2 or 3 of that vision. And they're just now able to start doing some assessment, just now start collecting data or defining what their goals are going to be or setting new goals. So we're so early in this for divisions that all these hiccups that we're talking about, the IT hiccups and some of the downtime or the uptime, right? All of that is still so relatively new. And school divisions are still in that point where they're saying, okay, we had this vision in August or July. Here we are in October. Where are we in supporting that vision? And so as we talk about buildings and facilities, you know, how does that support that vision? How do those resources support the new vision for schools and this new way of learning? And again, we're so early in all of it. I think that it's natural to have these challenges, but when you begin to act, you know, to execute and to engage and, you know, putting forth that plan, it's really important to have conversations like these, because it's good to bring everybody together and see what we're all going through. So I'm interested to hear from the rest of the panel too today about your vision, how it's going. How are you beginning to assess that vision, or are you even able to begin assessing the vision, because we are so early in the process?
Perfect. Thank you so much. We were talking prior to having the participants join us that we've all learned how to have patience in our process, because those IT challenges that you were mentioning too, a lot of us have just it's rolled off the cuff. It's not a big deal. Like you were saying before, there was a gentleman that was on a call and had his kids coming in, and you know, that was made news because it was such a big deal that this guy was on a virtual call and had his kids run in by accident. He was a diplomat or so, whatever his role was. But now we're all facing those things, and we're all learning how to be patient. So I'm going to let Karen speak to the actual local application within your schools, how things have been working for you, and maybe tell us a little bit about how you guys have gone back to school, if it has been completely remote or if it's been a blend, and what you see moving forward. And you talked prior about space and how that has impacted things. So I'll let you talk.
So we were able to bring our kindergarten, preschool through 6th graders back 100% 5 days a week. And the way we did that was we spread them out in our schools. I was saying earlier that we have one brand new school and one newly renovated school. And we were very lucky that our community and our school board and our architects were just so smart about the use of space and really looking into the future. So we find that those schools are very capable of handling the needs of our students to be able to space them out. And they have very open areas with really good airflow and great wiring, so we can get access where we need to get access for students. And so we just spread our students out in our elementary and middle school buildings. And then our 7th through 12th graders are coming 2 days a week, and then they're 3 days a week remote. And there's a Wednesday flex day where we bring students in if they need more than 2 days a week. We actually have some coming 5 days a week if they need it in grades 7 through 12. But that flex day is really to catch kids up, to do remediation. And that has been a challenge in the sense that our area is very rural. And so we have a lot of spots that don't have good broadband. Our Chief Operations Officer, Mac Dewis, and his team have done a great job of working with local companies and our Board of Supervisors to get that broadband rolling and trying to get towers up, and also to be able to offer service to parents who may not be able to afford service. And so Dr. Dewis and his team have worked with some service providers who are actually charging very minimal monthly rates to families who have students in school if they can hook into the new broadband. Our local education foundation is actually paying for installation of equipment if the parents will pick up the monthly fees. And so again, we were just very lucky that we had a community and a team we could devote to that and really focus on that. But it's definitely challenging because we still hear of kids not being able to get on the internet during the day. They have to wait until their parents get home to use their phone hotspots, things like that, or phone hotspots that just won't handle the Canvas work that we're trying to download. We also have gotten some hotspots ourselves and taken those out to students. And again, it's about cell phone coverage there. So I think we've done a really good job of meeting the needs of a lot of our students. But I think as a community, we have a long way to go as far as getting the access out into some of our more remote areas. But I think our schools have done a great job of trying to get as many students in as we can. I think the other thing that we are looking at and just thinking about challenges that are coming, we're preparing for our first rounds of SOL testing at the end of this semester. And we began to kind of plan for that, bringing our students in our virtual school. We have almost 3,000 students who are 100% remote in our new virtual school, bringing them in for testing and keeping them in cohorts and separated. And we're just finding our buildings can't hold that many students at one time in large areas with our own wireless internet access. So I think what we find is we use the word pivot a lot. We start down a road and then we have to pivot and rethink what we're doing, and kind of seems we're bumping into walls. But the one thing I can say about teachers and students is that they're just really resilient and they just keep going.
I know, and I'm just thinking about my own daughter's experience in college when she's had to take certain exams and tests and things of that nature, and they have proctors. I'm just putting that out there. Like, is that something?
Well, for SOL testing, they have to be in person. So we have to have a proctor actually with them in the room. Okay. And so it's a little bit different with that. As far as some of our testing has to be done face-to-face. Some of it we can do. The teachers are actually doing it one-on-one, like a one-on-one Zoom or something like that. So we've adapted in that way.
Okay. Very good. So aside from that piece, I know, Nikki, you handle a lot of the actual safety protocols that you have to implement. And some of those are standard applications that you have to do. And what are the challenges as it relates to this new environment? What have you had to change?
Yeah, so we can't specifically change anything. We just have to kind of follow the legislation. So at this point, all normal drills, the fire drills, the lockdown drills that are in legislation, the number of that you have to complete during certain periods of time still need to happen. But the big change is how do you do that? If you have a cohort of students that come Monday and Wednesday and another that come Tuesday and Thursday, you still have to plan your drills so that all of your students, receive the training in those drills. And even if you just have staff in your buildings, you want to make sure that everyone's safe. So like our safety drills and our safety planning applies to all members of the school family, not just the students. So we want to make sure that the adults are, participating in the drills and whatnot. And drills are supposed to happen, at varying times during the day. And, evacuations, you go to varying locations to meet up and things like that. So that's kind of where it gets a little bit more difficult depending on the size of your population. And do you have the space, if you will, to spread out when you are evacuating the building and when you're outside? And then also, your lockdown drills and tornado and earthquake drills, like how do you conduct those in a COVID friendly environment, if you will, wearing the masks, but how do you keep them 6 feet apart in a drill like that? So those are the kind of situations that we've been having to kind of work through with schools and divisions on ideas of how to make that happen. One of the ideas is if you just have staff with you in the buildings, you can do a lot of tabletop exercises where you walk through, a scenario, if you will, which can be really a great learning experience. And we tend not to have as much time for that during school as it normally runs, not in 2020. So that can be a great kind of increase learning situation for that. And then as far as like climate goes, and I didn't ask about this, but I'm just gonna pop in there. The DCJS does a secondary school climate survey every year. Per legislation, we alternate between middle and high school each year. And the VDOE has always done a working condition survey as well. And so this year we've actually combined and worked together to create one survey, which is now the Virginia School Survey of Climate and Working Conditions. Very nice, long title. But we thought long and hard this year about, do we want and need and do we have the option to maybe not conduct this in this kind of weird environment where we have some remote learning, they're not in the building, like do we know what the climate is? But we kind of decided that it really is important for us to continue to think about climate even when the kids are not in the building themselves. So we are going forward with this. It all is in legislation, so we don't really have that much leeway of saying we don't want to have it, but we could, we have adjusted the survey so that it does, it would apply to remote learning, to hybrid learning, and to in-person learning, and we have that as one of the options, so we can kind of tease out that data based on how those students have been learning the year, as well as the staff. So I really think that we're going to get some, some not standalone good data, but a comparison from like last year and previous years. And then as we move forward, how is this COVID environment and this remote and hybrid learning affecting the culture and the climate of the schools? So we're really excited to see what we get from this.
Yeah, I love that. I think that'll be so interesting to compare and contrast. Absolutely. I was actually kind of going back, maybe Karen could speak on this too, is that piece of wellness and that connectivity between the students. I know we've seen some applications. I've listened to different speakers talk on this subject as well, and how we need that connectivity with each other and eye contact and feeling verified by having those connections between students. Are there things that you guys are putting in place to allow that, to feel that that there is a sense of connection and there's opportunities for that eye contact and engagement, even though you can't be physically close?
Right.
Any thoughts
So
on that?
a lot of our work in the in-person model has been about keeping students in cohorts. And so we have small groups of cohorts at our in-person level that range between 10 and 14 students, and they stay with that cohort all day long, every day. And that's really how we minimize, and knock on wood, it's been very successful. We have most of our COVID-19 cases have been from the community or community acquired and not within our schools. And so within that cohort, we say, when you're working together, put your mask on, but we don't push them to stay always 6 feet apart, because we know so much of our learning for our young students is really that ability to socialize and play together and talk together. And so that's how we're really managing it. They do wear masks. When they travel through the building, they wear masks. But their desks are spaced apart. But we know that there's times that when they go to recess and things, they're going to play together. And we've been able to manage that. And it's been more about, we know we're going to have cases, but can we contact trace and make sure we don't cross kids all day long so that we spread it. So I think that our youngest learners are doing really well with that because they're seeing each other every day. Our high schoolers are doing okay. They are in small cohorts too with learning coaches. And there's a real emphasis on social emotional learning and how to work together and how to deal and collaborate with everything going on in their lives. And they seem to be doing well too. And they see themselves as a family in that cohort. I think where we see most of our concern, and probably I would almost say grieving a little, is our teachers in our virtual schools. And I think our teachers are really missing their contact with students. And that's what we're hearing. They feel like they're struggling to make those connections like they would if they were in a classroom with them on a day-to-day basis. I don't know that we'll see the effect of that for children until we get those virtual students back in the building. Because they don't know any different if they're at home by themselves or just with their brothers or sisters. But I think we'll see the social emotional impact of that more once we get them back in school. Our teachers are trying really hard in our virtual environment to do Zoom lessons or group lessons. They're doing small group lessons. They're even doing one-on-one work with students. So they're doing the best they can, but there's only so many hours in the day. And I think our teachers are struggling there because they feel so responsible for those little ones.
Sure.
Aaron, I'm not sure if you answered this. There was one question about your teachers that are doing their virtual teaching. Are they at the school or are they working from home?
We have a combination, and I'm hoping that as we are learning lessons about how we as adults work best, we also take those lessons and apply them to students. So we started with teachers who wanted to be in our virtual school. And we basically asked them, do you want to work from home or do you want to work in school? Some realized their personalities. They needed to be in a classroom or in an office space. They needed that structure. Some did not have good internet at home, so they needed to be in the school. So we've really allowed them to do what's best for them with the hope that they will learn that that's kind of what we need to do for kids, because some of our kids do better in one environment over another. So we have a combination based on what's best for our teachers.
Yeah, and I'll add to that at the state perspective. Internet access is not only an issue for kids. So we also have professionals that don't have internet access at their homes, so there is a mix statewide. I live in a county in Hanover County, just north of Richmond, that actually all the kids are back 5 days a week. And those kids in those buildings, they wear masks 24/7. So not just when they're moving or anything, they're always on. And by the way, the pushback has been very minimal. Kids want to be among their peers and a lot of times. Now, I will say on the flip side, I heard a comment the other day where a middle school kid said to me, he said, "It's amazing. We're fully virtual and I love it because nobody's popular anymore." Because the size of your muscles, the shoes you're wearing, nothing matters because now we're all equal in a virtual setting, which I found a fascinating thought and perspective on what's happening in this world now, and how real, the stratification of kids is in when they are in school together. So it's kind of an interesting perspective. And then I wanted to, I was looking at the other one, the other question in there from Kim, and it was talking about the hybrid model in the future. And so I will tell you that right now, every school division in Virginia is offering a virtual option for students. So, and we are actually gathering statewide data, getting ready to gather it, on what percentage of parents are opting for that approach by division. I do think it's going to be the future. This is going to be a crowding elimination factor in the future. I think that we're going to see less initial demand for new buildings, because we're going to see maybe 10 to 15, maybe 18% of kids choosing online options statewide. Now, so that can reduce the load on a building. However, I think that in all new construction, everybody's going to have to think about all the new things or features that may need to be offered. For instance, everybody's now moving to one-to-one. So every kid's going to have internet access. So where could you provide internet access through an entire campus in covered areas, so that it might facilitate the possibility of having outdoor classrooms? How might you be able to provide internet access to the community using the school campus? Because we know that a lot of school divisions have been bringing in what they call like internet on wheels or something, and different hotspots, like powerful hotspots. But how could you pre-wire that into the campus to provide some access? And then think about, as the flow has always been through a bus loop. And now we're having a decreased number of buses that have to flow through, but an increased number of parental drop-offs. And so how do you redesign to kind of find a middle ground in between there that provides you flexibility, or maybe multiple lanes, or something that could provide for the future? So I think that I'll challenge the architects to innovate in those areas, because we got to think about what the new reality is going to be, and it's not going to be the old reality. That is for sure.
Speaking of ways to design something, or to kind of think through those things from a safety standpoint, the big deal is ventilation, and maybe you prop a door open so that you get more fresh air, and that's a safety issue. There's a safety risk. So how can we kind of be creative in how we increase that ventilation and allow more open spaces, but continue to have, that safety and security of, a locked door or a barrier of some sort?
And I would think also, just thinking from the architectural standpoint, areas and buildings that are being built that you can access, the public can access, that's kind of separated from the school for a safety reason. I think schools are going to have to start thinking more about their doors are not just open from 8 to 3, but all the time. And how do we staff evening hours, and having enough plugins for kids to charge their devices as they're working. And so really, internet cafes really that are not just during the school day, but all the time. I think it'll be interesting to see the designs coming over the next few years, that from lessons that we learn.
Yeah, I think I'm a child of the 80s. I will tell you. So I was in elementary in the 80s, and I was in an open classroom situation school, which was, back in the day, there was a lot of open planning. And I'm wondering if you might be going back to the old file cabinets to find the plans for what you did with movable walls back in that day, because quite honestly, flexibility with moving walls is the future. I mean, so that you can redesign a space in a heartbeat for whatever need you have. So for instance, when school divisions start sending kids back in these hybrid settings or blended settings, it could be that you know, you have kids working in open spaces that need to be multi-purpose spaces now, and not just the cafeteria and things like that. So movable walls, I think, are something that we really need to think about in soundproofing that comes along, issues that come along with that.
Along that same lines of that, you know, kind of mobile design, if you will, you know, there's lots of furniture out there that can, you know, be modular, if you will, and it can change, and maybe moving more towards that instead of having, like, you know, 100 desks, like individual desks and chairs in a classroom or whatnot that you have to clean every day. You know, maybe having some of those modular furnishings that, you know, it's easier to clean because it's like multiple people at one desk, or not one desk, that would be way too close. But, you know, you get the idea, like things like that. And that can move around.
Yeah, flexibility. I think, I mean, obviously we've seen applications. It's good if you've got a way to pull apart and come together, pull apart and come together. So you resources that give you that option to do that, and then are very multifunctional, are definitely key things. Well, I think all of us, our time is kind of up, so I don't want to overshoot that for everyone that's on the panel and those that are listening. But like, as we talked about before, we all have our different pieces of this puzzle, and all of it matters. And that's why we don't want to stay in our own little silos. We want to hear what's happening from a safety perspective when you're actually in the schools themselves, from IT, and bring a global picture of it all, so that we can help assist in the future. And I think obviously some of this has been very difficult and challenging, and the pivot points that we've all had to do. But I also believe there's some really beautiful things that have come from it too. So hopefully we can focus on those and see how we can move that into the future. Does anyone else have any questions? Trying to see if there's any more over here. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it. Do you guys have anything else to add? Nope. Thank you guys so much. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate it. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.